G'day there. Have you ever gone out for a shoot, all enthusiastic, only to come back a bit disappointed and nothing much to show for it? Or have you found yourself complaining about the conditions or just being uninspired to get out and shoot at certain times of the year? We're going to discuss how that could be impacting your photography and what you can do about it. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, so if you need a website, a domain or an online store, make your next move with Squarespace and use the discount code Marr. Being caught between the conditions we have and the conditions we'd prefer to have is one of the biggest mistakes we can make as photographers. The interesting thing about this mistake is that you're more likely to make it after you've been shooting landscapes for a few years, and you're less inclined to make it if you're only just getting started in landscape photography. Being too set on the image or the conditions you're shooting in could really get in your way. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain, because this is something that could really improve your landscape photography. Your reluctance to shoot in conditions that are not ideal could be harming your photography, limiting your opportunities to develop your skills and your chances to capture unique images. Potentially making this mistake can happen for several reasons. One is planning the wrong things. Now, having a plan for a landscape shoot can be a good thing. You don't need a detailed plan all the time, but knowing roughly when you're going to go out, what time the sun is going to set or rise, knowing when the best light is going to be, is definitely going to increase your chances of taking a great image. Even having potential locations in mind that you want to check out, either from looking at maps or from previous scouting trips, can help. However, if your plan goes to the extent where you have set in your mind the image that you're going to take, you could have an issue when the conditions aren't right when you arrive on location. Your success in getting a decent image really depends on your willingness to let this part of the plan go. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the video. Another reason is when you're too particular about the conditions you want to shoot in. I'm sure you've heard of being a light snob, where you decide not to go out because the light isn't going to be perfect. This can be extended to other conditions, like there not being enough fog, or the tide is too far out, or there's not enough cloud cover, or maybe there's too much cloud cover, or the wind is too strong. Whatever the excuse is, it's not ideal, so you call the trip off. While there's no guarantee that you'll capture your best image if you do go out, you can guarantee that you won't if you don't go out. A third reason is your shooting style. If you're not careful, strictly sticking to one style of landscape photography can be doing more harm than good, particularly if it impacts the conditions you're prepared to shoot in. Personally, I don't worry too much about a style. I find it can be too restricting, and I much prefer to have the freedom to capture any image I find at the time. But if you do feel more comfortable in creating a photography style for your images, I recommend developing more than one that gives you the opportunity to get out no matter what the conditions. So develop a style that is ideal for gloomy days, as well as a style for days that have full sunlight. It's not hard to work out what the impact of all of this is going to be. Either you're going to go out in the mindset of capturing a particular shot that the conditions aren't going to provide you, or you're going to decide not to go out at all. Either way, the outcome isn't going to be great. Have you heard yourself or perhaps other photographers mention how uninspired they are to do landscape photography during summer, or talk about there not being enough fog for their woodland shot, or the fact that the tide hasn't come in enough so they can't take the image they wanted? I've been guilty of saying things like this myself, but if I stuck to this approach, I wouldn't get those stunning sunset colours we get here in summer. I would have missed the shots in the forest that didn't need any fog, and I wouldn't have come across the details and the patterns that can be found during low tide up near Broome. Every time you decide not to go out because of the conditions, it's a missed opportunity to capture images in conditions that you don't normally shoot in, and a chance to challenge yourself and to learn something new. How many times have you watched your favourite landscape photographer on YouTube as they're looking for a composition, and while they're talking to the camera, you can see a potential composition just behind them? It's a common mistake that we all make, even if we're not recording footage for YouTube, looking for something that's not there and missing the compositions that are. Before I share some quick tips on how to avoid making this mistake, I just want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I've talked about the ease of use Squarespace has for setting up a website and sharing your images, and the templates that make your images and content look great. But there's so much more that Squarespace offers as your photography grows. You can add a blogging feature where you can share more details about your photography trips. This is a fantastic way to reflect on your photography and grow your audience without necessarily running a YouTube channel. When you're ready to sell your images, you can add an online store that integrates with payment gateways, and you have access to a range of analytic information so that you can see what visitors are interested in right across your website. Of course, if you need help with any of this, you can use their 24/7 award-winning customer service. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial that'll give you heaps of time to set up a website. And when you're ready to launch, make sure you go to squarespace.com/Andrew Marr to get 10% off your first purchase. So what can you do to make sure that this mistake happens less to you? Well, the good news is that it's not any lack of skill, it's just a mindset. And the first step is to recognize that perhaps you're falling into this trap. Watching this video is going to help with this, and if you find yourself uninspired to get out or frustrated while you're out there with the conditions, recognize it for what it is and work out what you can do about it. Next is be prepared to be flexible and adapt your plan. Like any plan based around some assumptions, like the conditions, when those assumptions don't come about, then the plan needs to be adjusted. Those who embrace the conditions and change their plan are more likely to discover better images when they're out in the field. Next, instead of wishing for conditions you don't have, shift your focus to the conditions you do have and spend some time observing your location. I think this skill is so important that I did a video about observation skills last month, which I'll link in the description below. Part of observation is understanding the conditions. This is important because the fourth tip is to look for images and compositions that are available in the conditions that you have. This might seem obvious, but you're more likely to have success shooting for the conditions that you have rather than the conditions you wish you had. Challenge yourself, because if you shoot in conditions that you might initially feel are a constraint, there are multiple benefits. You'll learn more about how light behaves in different conditions, extend your photography by developing new skills. You'll broaden the style of landscapes you typically shoot, create more opportunities for yourself to go out and shoot photos, and perhaps you'll capture an image you wouldn't have before. When you're finding yourself wanting to give up and head home, try out some of these tips to help you focus on finding the image that's there and not the image that isn't. I find that beginners don't tend to fall into this trap as much as people who have been doing landscape photography for a while. If you think back to when you started out, if you were anything like me, you were just so keen to get out and shoot at every opportunity. You didn't care whether it was raining, overcast, or even full sunshine. Every outing was a learning opportunity, every adventure was a chance to take a shot and get better at your landscape photography. I think this is really important to remember. So let's make a pact. The next chance we have to get out, let's make sure that we get out regardless of the conditions. And let me know how that goes in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If it was helpful, please help me out by hitting the like button. If you have any friends that are starting to fall into this trap, please share the video with them. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.